I truly believe that God doesn't put anything in front of us that we can't handle. I call it a hurdle, and if you're either going to go over it, go under it, blast right through it, but you're going to get over that hurdle.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome back for another episode of the 10 Code Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Medlin, and I want to ask you something or have you ponder on something. You ever had that one person who you feel like you could have a conversation with them for hours, and it feels like pretty much everything they say has a profound point, a profound message, and they just have a very uplifting energy about them? Well, Banning Sweatland is one of those people, if I must say. I'd like to welcome him back to the podcast. He is a patrol supervisor at a sheriff's office in Texas. He's actually running for sheriff, which is awesome. He's also a former Marine. Here's my conversation with Banning Sweatland, and get ready because we cover a lot, and it's all important, and a good proposal story to highlight it. Here we go. Well, 2024 is upon us. There are people who are still wanting to get into law enforcement, to which I'm not going to knock that decision if someone's considering it, Banning. I'm really not. We need cops, and we need good cops, and people are going to be calling 911, so we need the right people to show up. However, you've been on the job for a while, so what would you suggest to someone if they are thinking about getting into the career?
To not shut it out as fast as a lot of them are doing, to go experience a ride along. I would experience a ride along during the week, and then I would experience a ride along during the weekend. And people also ask me, is it better to do a ride along in the country, or is it better to do one down on the where are you going to work at? Where do you want to work? What type of stuff have you looked up that backs the reason on why you want to be a police officer to begin with? So I'll tell people, you can go watch all the reruns of Cops you want. You can watch that show OP Live. I think that's what it's called. On Patrol Live. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
It's where you can see another perspective of it. Then, of course, all the investigative stuff that you can watch on TV, and just kind of you gotta have you do as well as I do. It's a true calling. So, I mean, if it's something where you're like, well, I don't know if I like to wear all that gear, or boy, that's 12 hours a day. Boy, man, that's a lot. If it's knocking down your cons faster than it is your pros, I would probably look at something else. But it's still a very, very rewarding career. I mean, especially for somebody that can pull it off. I've been very blessed. It's destroyed things for me, but it's also built things for me, and I know that's the same with you. And 21 years into it now, I still feel it's a calling. I still feel that it's something that I wanted to do since I was a child, and I stuck with that dream. And every day when I get dressed to go do this, it's still, even though I'm the patrol supervisor coming out there, it's what's going to happen tonight.
Mm-hmm.
What are we going to get into, and are my guys going to be safe to where they can go home at the end of the night? And that's my biggest challenge, and I think it is for everybody, that their partners come home safe. But the biggest thing for me is to make sure that they truly look into this, and then they invest into themselves. Are they in shape? Are they ready to go do this? Across the country, you have a lot of sheriff's offices, sheriff's departments that still don't have any prerequisites. It's basically, do you have a heartbeat? Have you gone?
Really?
Yeah, oh, yes.
Oh, man.
Even currently where I work, I was surprised. It's the only department I went to. I was speaking to we'll call it the professional standards person. And I was like, hey, do I go to the hospital and do it's known as a activity set, where I'm going to, go do a stress test, at the very minimum. And they're like, what's that? Well, it's just to make sure your ticker's running good. And, we're going to check some, maybe some blood panels, and make sure you don't have something serious. And they're like, no, you just came from that other city. You seem fine. You're breathing. Well, we just signed up. But for me, it's a big deal, because I want,
Oh, yeah.
be in the job as long as they can. And I truly believe that if you have everybody at your agency in decent shape, I think that's going to help with the insurance. I think it's going to help with a myriad of things. So
Yeah, absolutely. You talk like someone who's running for sheriff. No.
just a little bit. Yes.
Well, you did. We could talk about the negative all day, and we might just get to that in a little bit.
Sure.
But I do want to focus on the good things, and I appreciate your very insightful answer about if someone's looking into it, what they really should do other than just thinking about it.
Oh, yeah.
What have been some of the blessings that have been brought about in your life and your experience from law enforcement?
Well, first off, my wife. So I would have never met her because dispatchers are stuck in a dark hole in a secure part of a facility at most agencies. Um, and that's exactly the fact with her. And I'll give that 30-second, 30,000-foot view of me coming into work one night having a horrible week. I was still in Canine, my last agency at Haltom City, and I'm allowed to say their name, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, having a great career, but a bad week. One of those, just like, boy, we couldn't catch a break. We were getting into pursuits. People were getting away. A lot of BMVs. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's burglary of motor vehicles. And we used to get hammered at that city for it. I'm not sure if they still do or not, but during the burglary hours of 0200 to 0500 hours, we were just getting hammered. But I came into work. I usually got there. I'm trying to remember what time I got there. I guess it was around 1800 hours. I was working midnights. And at that time, I was working a 9-hour shift because we had that federal hour being a canine officer to where they either had to pay you an hour overtime, or they could let you off an hour early just for the care and maintenance of your dog. So they used to let me off an hour early. I never got 1 hour of overtime the entirety that I was in canine. So you're leaving that on 9 years, something like that, not 1 hour of overtime. They were really quick at monitoring that, and props to the supervisors for that. They're like, ooh, it's about to roll into 5 o'clock. Let's get Sweatland out of here. And my number on the radio was 292. And they're like, 292, you are clear to go home. I was already sharking on the north side of the city, and I left for the city. So I was ready to go. It's usually a long night. Um, but blessings, you say blessings, and a lot of people look at blessings in a different way. A lot of people, I believe, across the country look at blessings of what's in the bank. Do I have $1 million in the bank? No. I got into law enforcement, and I knew from the very beginning this is going to be shift work, low salary type pay if it's a salaried position, and sometimes good insurance, sometimes not so good insurance. And technically I'm at my fifth agency in 21 years. Now, the first agency was a month where I was a reserve. Second agency was, I think, 2 months, don't remember my words, maybe 3. My third agency was my first, we'll call real agency. It was a larger agency. It was Haltom City. And that's where I've learned most of what I've had. And most of what I've seen in law enforcement came from that agency. So doing that, you say blessings. So my wife, for one, if you want to know who she is or what she looks like, just type in Banning Sweatland in YouTube. And I want you to look for a little yellow Camaro. Brand new Camaro. That's when the new Camaros came out in 2011 or whatnot. And I proposed to her when she got off of work one night at 11 o'clock.
Nice.
Big ladder truck out there. I had a whole bunch of police cars lined up. I had some city officials.
Oh, wow.
And then about just 60 folks that were common friends and her family that all came in. I covered all the cameras around the police department because in the nerve center of a police department, usually you can see the external cameras for safety and security. And I covered all those. And then as soon as she walked out, Scott, when you watch the video, it's pretty cool. I had the Fort Worth police helicopter come in with a spotlight. They were already doing, so this is my disclaimer on this. They were doing training that night. They were already going that route, that heading. And I got lucky.
Yes.
But to where they came out to where they're not, charging the taxpayers extra money or whatever for the gas. And they were doing what's called turns around a point. And they just illuminated the light. It's okay to illuminate a police department. It's not going to wake any of the residents up. And basically we illuminated her when she came out. And I had a really cool song in the background that the band allowed me to use, which was, back then on YouTube, was, you can't use this music. You can't download something from Napster, put it on, whatever. And so, but what's really cool is the band allowed me to do it. But she came out, we lit her up. She almost didn't come out. She thought, I should know what's going on. I'm in dispatch. Right. And I got lights out here. Because we literally everybody turned on their red and blues at the same time. The spotlight came on. I got lucky enough to where she heard my voice. She came out. And what was really cool is I got to wear a little microphone that was connected to a police car. I paid for the disc. I paid for the time to use it. And we have our own private little video that we've shared it with family or whatnot, but it's just a little, what I was saying to her when I was really close with that helicopter going around and all the lights and stuff. If you use the viewer on YouTube, you're not going to hear what's going on. You just see me get down on one knee, and in about 17, 18 seconds, she eventually says yes.
Eventually. Okay, good.
To me, it felt like a lifetime, but that's a blessing to
That
me, was
is.
to have her say yes to a guy like me that's been around the block a time or two and been beat up in the military and beat up in law enforcement. And she's 10 years younger than me, and she says I do, and I'm like, holy crap, this
Are
is
you sure?
awesome. Yeah. So it was that's my biggest blessing, and we have a beautiful daughter. It's 8 years old now, and she has a nickname in school, and it's Ronda Rousey. And now that's scary as a police officer, and the name just kind of stuck. She's actually straightened up a lot, but she was the type of little girl that if she saw a bully or something like that, she'd be the one to go confront that person. So I'm not saying Ronda Rousey should just go beat people up, but if she saw somebody picking on somebody, she'd go over there and double up her fist and protect somebody. Or she even took it to the point to where if you're cutting in the bathroom line in between, she's going to go and we got that fixed. But she got that name Ronda Rousey for a reason, and I love the heck out of her.
She's she's a protector like daddy.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know we're going down the rabbit hole on this, but another blessing. I was at that large agency, and I got to experience a myriad of training. They had at the time when I was doing it, I thought it was just normal for law enforcement. And we were right next to Fort Worth. So I knew Fort Worth PD trained a lot. And we got to go to the range. I want to say it was darn near almost every quarter. And then when we went to the range, we rolled assets on the range. We'd bring police cars out there. We would bring some of them were indoor, really nice ranges at Tarrant County Community College, and some of them were not so nice ranges outside. But we could really get dynamic with that training, and what we're actually going to experience on the street, we could try to do that right there in training. And I applaud the guys that drew that up every quarter and put us through some amazing training.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Training's crucial, crucial. And unfortunately, I see some videos on YouTube. It just it's lacking in certain areas. But no, that's great. You were able to work at that larger agency where there is more training options for sure. I didn't work at a large agency, but it was big enough where there were resources available and enough community colleges in the area where we could sign up, and we weren't so short staffed that people couldn't go to training. I don't know how it is now,
Oh,
but
yeah.
yeah, training is huge. Well, no, that man, the story of the proposal was awesome. I guess you said it's on YouTube.
It is. It is. If you just
Okay, all right. Well,
you
it'll
can type
be
in banning Sweatland proposal, and it'd be the first or second video on there.
yeah, well, cool. I'll just put a link to that video on the podcast notes right then and there. And then you just mentioned the Fort Worth helicopter. Our sheriff's helicopter just flew over because one of the one of the deputies who flies it lives in my neighborhood, so he always flies over the neighborhood. It's pretty safe to say it was
That's
him.
that's awesome. That's
Yeah,
outstanding.
right as you're talking about the helicopter. Anyway, well, I don't want to harp on the negative, but we got to be real. It's a very challenging time for those in the profession. Overall, I'm not saying everywhere, and I'm not saying every officer is struggling, but these are times we haven't seen. I don't know if it hasn't been seen before, but as of recently, staffing shortages, morale issues. Some officers feel straight up abandoned and like they're on their own. What are some of the challenges that you see law enforcement facing as we go into more into 2024? Because, and I ask you that because you're in touch with so many police officers and sheriff's deputies and all that all across the country. So what are you hearing? What are you seeing?
I am, and God's blessed me with a reach. I have police officers that I'm connected to over in South Africa, to
Wow.
England, to the Canada, Royal Canadian Mounted Patrol, and some of the negative right now is some of these agencies still require a 2 or 4 year degree. So the officer already, or the student, if you will, when they're going into this, is already invested by paying for a degree, which is amazing. I'm not knocking that. That's great if they go do that. It wasn't for me at the time when I was their age. And then they get to an agency, and that agency goes through all the money that it takes to hire them and everything, and then they divulge what their starting pay is. And Scott, it's getting better,
Mm-hmm.
but some of these agencies are still at less than $15 an hour. And when you look at somebody trying to raise a family or just themselves, if they're single, when you're making that type of money and when you just get the minimum of taxes taken out from the federal government, when you look at your take home pay,
And inflation.
yeah, you've got guys that are working at a fast food joint in their junior year of high school that are making more than law enforcement that are responding to a call that are trying to dodge bullets or block bullets or you know what I'm talking about, just the basics
Yeah.
of being law enforcement itself, and they're just not making that much money. I'm not saying that everybody across the country needs to raise it like they did for fast food joints to $15 an hour. That's not what I'm saying, but you have really got to get with your other commissioners of your county or your city council members in a municipality or your state leaders at state enforcement. And we've really got to do something about this. Now, I'll say Texas is blessed in a lot of ways to where our Texas Department of Public Safety, they have finally refined that pay to where those men and women that have served and take that oath there, they're getting paid decently. And it took, working in this field as long as I have, I would back them up with canine on several occasions. And we would sit there and shoot the breeze after a traffic stop, and I was making more than them, and they were responsible for 5 counties for every crash that went on. And nowadays, and this is open to the public, and everybody knows this, they're doing what's called border ops. So for half the month, they're going to be in the county that they're stationed, and however many other rural counties that they're responsible for. Some of the troopers up here, it can be 4 to 7 counties depending on what part of the month it is and who's rotated down to the border or the capital, because Austin, we're going through that crisis of needing law enforcement in that city.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
why when I just say the name of it, but they're having to learn municipal type enforcement, even though they're a state patrol officer, and that's not typically what they learn. But they're having to do all that, and a lot of these troopers, Scott, they have families. They have a lot of them are in college, trying to do college and law enforcement, and I see that as a negative to where one on the equipment, all the miles that they're having to do going back and forth to the border, so the state's having to pick up more money. They're having to make the budget bigger. Now they're paying these guys a little bit more, which is a good thing. I think they're getting a little bit of hazard pay going to the border. But it's still, are they doing truly enforcement action when we get down there? Well, not in the essence of what we think it is. It's more of oh, you came across the river. Let me make sure you get up here. Oh, you're claiming that. Okay, well, you're going to go to that bus over there. We're gonna do check in, and this is just stories that I'm hearing from my troopers that now. Is the governor making things better? You betcha. So he's seized a lot of the land back. I'm not going to go into the legalities of that because they're still working all that out. But there's a deal in the Constitution that's allowing him to do that because unfortunately the federal government has not done what they're supposed to do, and he's doing the right thing. So that's not so much a negative; that's a positive on our lawmakers here in the
Yeah.
state of Texas. But the biggest negative that I'm seeing, and just like what you talk about a lot, is the mental health. So and I'm reaching out to the sheriffs and the chiefs across this country. And if this is making the hairs on your neck stand up as you're listening to this, because I'm talking to you, you are absolutely responsible for every single sworn entity or person that you have on that street that's going out there to report to these citizens and help them. If you are not checking their mental health on a regular basis, shame on you. And I will come to your agency. I'll talk to you about it. On what I've seen, I've had friends take their own life in this profession, and I hate to be sitting here saying that. That's not something you want on your resume. That's not something you want to be able to explain to the people. I've gone down dark parts of my career, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I think I was at my 10-year mark, 11-year mark, and boy, it was just like I woke up thinking they don't prosecute anybody. I see dead babies on crashes. I see drunk drivers getting away with, and I say getting away with it. They're getting minimum sentencings if they were caught, and it's like you start thinking to yourself, why am I doing this? I'm entering people over and over and over again to this system that's not doing anything. Now, after doing some research, getting some professionals telling me exactly what my mind is doing and the subconscious and everything like that, that's absolutely normal. So if you are in law enforcement and you're at that crossroads of, am I doing a good job? I'm going to tell you right now, you are, and you are essential. and everything that you're doing, even though you feel like that nothing's coming of it, you are absolutely doing what you're supposed to do. And we're going to keep putting these guys back, and we're going to do what we can to take them off the street for at least that night. They haven't killed somebody on a good day. But that's the negatives that I see in law enforcement and training. I'm gonna touch on training because when I retired out of Haltom City and came up here, I said to myself, I'm done putting on the uniform. I'm going to use the skill set that I learned, and I'm going to hire guys as instructors that are even better than me, which is a ton of them out. I mean, there's so many people that are better than me in law enforcement, especially on the training side of it. And we're going to put an instructor cadre together, and we're going to go out here and we're going to put these guys through the motions, including SWAT and just basic patrol tactics. And another part of the company was arming Texas teachers and putting them back in the classroom. Thought that would be easy as soon as I got into it, but I want you to think about the worst math teacher, English teacher that you've ever had, and now you're going to strap them with a gun and you're going to put it back in the classroom. Now, props to the teachers because it's a volunteer position in the state of Texas, and you're not getting paid more, and you're usually doing this training on your own time. So there's an amazing thousands of teachers across the state of Texas that do this on their own time, and they go out and train on their own time.
Good.
Training's not allotted, so there's a lot of pluses with that as well. But the negative side is rural agencies across the entire country are not either budgeting correctly for training to make sure their officers are trained, or they simply do not have the tax backing to provide to these officers and bring in a good instructor to teach them what that they need to teach.
Man, you covered so much that needed to be said. And I
Yes, sir.
appreciate you saying all of that. Really do. Very profound. When it comes to those that have been on the job for a while, needless to say, you've been on the job for a while, but
Sure.
you're a supervisor. For those wanting to excel in the profession of and get promoted,
Mhm.
how can they be leaders and not managers? Because we don't need managers, we need leaders. What's your advice?
So I actually, and I wrote this down the other day because my father told me this. My father was an officer in the Air Force, and let me see if I can get it pulled up here because I want to share this with you if I can.
Yeah, absolutely.
See, so my dad said this to me, and when I'm speaking to a young officer, and I'm in that mindset of teaching them if they want to go to that leadership route. There's some of them. There's a many hundreds, thousands of officers across this country. They want nothing to do with the stripes. They want nothing to do with the leadership. They want to go out there and be that on a chessboard. They're that pawn. They're the fighting force. They're the grunt, and they are friggin' awesome at it. So this is not for those people. Now, it may be someday, but you know, leaders talk about what they don't want to talk about. Leaders say what they don't want to say. Leaders listen to what they don't want to listen to. Leaders plan for what they don't want to happen. And the willingness to do that is what makes them a leader. So when you're in that agency, and I'm talking to the officers out there to where they're seeing some things that are going on that maybe should not be going on, when you are the one that stands up and goes approaches that peer and you say something that everybody wants to say but really won't do it, and you're the one that does that, like, hey, don't do that when you're on a traffic stop, or don't do that when you're clearing a building. Stop disrespecting somebody if you're on a domestic. Sometimes these officers hit a brick road themselves to where they don't feel like they're being effective out there, and they're the ones that truly are, maybe they would excel in some other type of job, and now they're kind of doing this as a 9 to 5. And as well as I do, law enforcement is not a 9 to 5, but it's somebody that's going to stand up for people in the department. Somebody's going to stand up for the citizens that we serve and protect, and they will take the scrutiny that goes along with that. And I believe that is a true leader. And those are the ones that we need to get the proper training for leadership development to truly lead these departments in the future.
That quote your dad shared with you, that was amazing. That was great.
And I can't say he owns that. I'm sure he learned that from somebody, but it really resonated with me. When I was 14 years old, when he was telling me that, and you're always looking up to your. I mean, I looked up to my dad till the day he passed, and he just passed last March in 2023. Everything that I was doing in life, I was like, man, I wonder if my dad's impressed. I wonder if my dad likes this. And just to give you a quick run down that rabbit hole if we have a second for that.
Mhm.
I joined the Marine Corps literally uh, a few months before getting out of high school, and I decided college wasn't for me, and I went the Marine Corps route. And I called my dad up and said, "Hey, I'm joining the Marine Corps." I actually had a little pre-written sheet that Sergeant Smiley, my recruiter, told me. He's like, "Here, you can read
His
this to
last
your."
name was Smiley.
Yes, it was. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. He took his own,
Oh,
but
darn. Right.
but life is life, and we move on and we learn from it, and hopefully we can make the rest of the troops better. But
Yes.
he gave me a written script that basically said, "I want you to read this to your dad since he's an officer in the Air Force, and this will ease things up." What he didn't write is a disclaimer on there saying, "I'm joking. Don't ever say something like this to your father." So I took it home, being a jarhead that has not been in training for a jarhead yet, but I fit the billet. I took that little thing out and said, "Dad, I want to tell you something." He's like, "Okay." And my dad is very direct and to the point. He was a fighter pilot. I said, "Well, I've decided to not join the Air Force because I want to work for a living. I'm joining the Marine Corps as an enlisted person." And I had some silence, and he hung up. And then I had to call him back. He hung up again. Then he did his breathing technique, his little triangle breathing, and then he eventually called me back. So we got through that. It was really tough. My dad, in his mind, wanted to pave the way for me to go to officers candidate school, become a fighter pilot.
Right.
And my report card at the time was the entire alphabet. I was not meant for high school. I was in learning disabilities. Matter of fact, my whole 4 years in high school, and I really did not care what my grades were, not thinking that it would impact me down the road. And I didn't start actually paying attention until I got in the Marine Corps, learning little things called MCIs and learning how to get promoted and meritorious promotions, and I actually excelled very well in the Marines. And then I excelled extremely well once I got into the police academy. So everything happens for a reason. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was my father had something planned in his life. Now, what's great is, as I found out before he passed, we had a very long phone call, which a phone call with my dad was usually 15, 20 minutes, checking on me. I'd check on him, ask how his wife's doing and his other grandkids and whatnot. And it would be a great conversation, Christmas or whatnot. And he worked until the day he died. He was a great man, but telling me that he was proud of me it was a shocker because the man didn't really have that in his vocabulary, and that's not his fault. That's the way he was raised by his
Right.
father. His father
Right.
was a preacher, but he actually came down and told me that, which was a huge thing for Banning. A lot of people know out there I'm also adopted at birth, and he's my adoptive father, and I couldn't been adopted into a better family. My mother was a flight attendant, and he was a fighter pilot, and got to learn all kinds of things and grow up in 23 different schools growing up. So I got to see this whole country, and I'm just glad I'm back home into Texas now. I love the entire country, but I just fit into Texas a little bit better than everywhere else I've lived.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. What's been your biggest lesson as a supervisor in law enforcement? Like lesson learned, even if it was the hard way.
The biggest lesson learned in when you become a supervisor is you have to be able to draw that line between work associate and friend.
Hmm.
And you have to, it's a kind of an invisible line that you kind of figure out once you go to some law enforcement leadership schools of when you can and cannot be present during certain talkings of officers out there. Meaning, now I'm talking about when they're just being officers talking to officers, there's nobody else around, they're dealing with the stress, and officers vent in different ways. But as a leader or a supervisor, you've got to be able to stop that talk if somebody can be offended. Um, and especially if you're out in a public area. I mean, officers will ride on that line, they will get really close to it, but it's just being the leader in the room. You got to come up and say, "Hey, let's hold that for outside the breakfast table. We'll wait till we go outside and do what we do before we go back on the street. But let's." And young officers don't quite understand that, but when you're talking like that from the mouth, and you're in a uniform and you're representing an agency and the people that you serve and protect, you really have to watch what's coming out of your mouth. So it's that's that's probably the biggest thing, because I went to an amazing supervisory school. It was a month long. Then when I came back, they were teaching you, what to look for red flags, and it was like I had a referee next to me just throwing them in the air, like, "Hey, that's another one. That's another one. You got to stop this. You got to do that. You got to do that." But you got to kind of get in the middle of that and figure out what the safe spot is. You still got to let humans be humans, but just kind of monitor it. You can still be their friend to an extent when they need it, but for the most time, your vicarious liability that rides on you as a supervisor is so much more than when I was just an officer. So um, for me, that's it. And making calls on the street, uh, priority call. You're going to a priority one call, and most of my time in law enforcement, I had that phone a friend or phone a supervisor. There was
Mm-hmm.
something usually working that outranked me, and if we came into a big situation, I could call and be like, "Hey, let me run this by you. This is what I think needs to be done. Here's how I'm going to handle it, unless you think otherwise." And I had that, but now it's me. So it's
Yep.
but having the experience that I have now, being able to come to a call, it's a lot easier for me to start pulling strings and doing the right things to take care of everybody on the scene, knowing what you need to do. And I can't even remember when that transition really happened. It happened when I was an officer, at that last agency I was saying is Haltom, is when you come up, when you finally learn all that stuff, you can kind of be that leader on the scene, make the calls, knowing that you're falling within the guidelines of what the chief of police has written for you, and you're following state and federal law. And it's just one of these days you wake up and you're like, "Hey, I actually know what I'm doing out here, and I don't need to call somebody." And I believe your whole career just goes into a completely different direction. Then it's a pretty amazing thing.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. But no, I'm glad you brought up the part about that fine line,
Yep.
because it is true, really is true. I just had one of my best friends. He just got promoted, and now he has to draw that line. And
Yes.
yeah, he had to. So
Going down that, if I could stick on this for 1 second,
yeah, yeah.
um, I didn't get into leadership till I guess later on in my career. I was that pawn on the chessboard that loved the going out there, getting the pursuits, getting into the crap, and you're there for 4 hours after shift change because you just arrested six people on whatever, and you're having to get all that paperwork done before the judge sees it, and you're trying to hurry. Um, but then when you become that supervisor, now you're looking at, are they using too much overtime? Are they talking too much in that room? Are they? We've got to really button this up because we have a budget to look for now. We're the leadership. Um, but what I'm getting at is I watched a lot of peers, which deservingly so, they promoted, and then we would go out to eat, and I'm like, "Golly, man, this guy or this gal is talking different now." We don't. It was hard for me to register, so I know the guys that I teach nowadays. It's going to be something that's tough for them to swallow that pill of, he's no longer just a deputy or an officer. Now he's in that leadership role, and he may not partake to go out and eat in a big group meeting or a big group setting. He may not do this, or, "Man, why does he keep calling me about my report?" He's trying to make you better. And he's trying to make the whole shift represent himself as a good leader, to where all the paperwork is done correctly. It's not just being a badass out on the street. In my professional opinion, past 20 plus years, the pen is mightier than the gun. So we've got to be able to go out there and articulate these reports and do a really good job. Why? Because people expect that. There's a victim on the other side on a lot of these things. We got to make sure they get victims assistance. We have to articulate these reports well. If we don't, this person may go free during trial. And then what was your whole reasoning for spending the time and the tax dollars for doing that if we're not going to articulate ourselves in these reports? So I believe the pen is much mightier than the sword. Do we have to be just as proficient with the sword? Absolutely, because we have to go home at the end of the night. We have to make sure these other people are unscathed and they go home without a limp or bump or a bruise as well. So we have to be proficient in both. But it's absolutely very important to be that one that's really good with reports, be able to articulate stuff and understanding case law.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, well, case law, yeah. Shoot, we could talk hours about that.
You bet.
Yeah, definitely. But hey, we're on leadership. You're running for sheriff. So how's
Mhm.
that journey been?
It's a journey, man. And I put a post out today or yesterday. And it was just a short little deal. It had some pictures on it, and some music from Gladiator, and basically it was just the past month of different little events that we've done during a campaign. And man, I'm not a politician. I'm a leader. I'm a leader in law enforcement, and I'm going to run it like a business if I get elected. But when you think politician, you think of the president, the congressman, amazing governors across this country that do the right thing. Heck, I think of Mark Lamb out in Arizona, America's sheriff. This dude's a true politician. He's out there. He's an awesome sheriff. But when I've had so many people come up to me from the first responder industry that I work with to citizens in this county, to business owners, churches, saying, Banning, please help with this, and let's make this a better place for everybody. And it's already echoing in my ears from everything that I'm seeing. We've got to make this better, just for the people. You finally learn how to fit in that niche and learn how to do it. And I've done a lot of research online and try to make myself better for anything from public speaking to what's a constitutional sheriff to what have you. And matter of fact, that came in handy just last night. We had our first and last. We're only having one. Can't really call it a debate. It's more of a candidate forum. And basically, I have two other running mates. I hate calling people opponents. I get along with these guys. But when you sit there and realize what you're actually going to be in charge of if you get elected, and it's a very large budget, you're going to be in charge of the jail, you're going to be in charge of patrol, you're going to be in charge of dispatch, you're going to report to commissioners every month, and you've got to come in with your A game to make sure that you're asking for the right assets and the money to take care of your people. And my wife and I prayed on this several months ago, and never planned for her to be anything like a campaign manager, but she has pretty much, the computer that I'm talking to you on right now is our family computer back here in the bedroom. And I'm sitting here Googling how to make a campaign sign because I had no clue. I had a lot of people to reach out to that gave me some ideas and stuff that are in politics, but she pretty much said move. And once I moved out of the way and she sat down, she was able to design all the different, bless you, all the different campaign posters, the flyers, ordering the pens to the bumper stickers. I mean, I had no clue that we were going to need all this. I'm like, who's going to want a friggin' pen with my name on it? Running for Jack County Sheriff, and then it's like, oh, we're out. We got to order more. Like, holy man, people actually,
all right.
They do want this stuff. And anyway, it's been a journey. I'm still learning it every day. I will never say I'm a master at anything,
right?
But it's definitely something that's not for everybody, because I've also learned it's a cutthroat industry. If people want it bad enough, and I'm not saying my running mates, but let's say the criminal element out there, if they don't want you as the sheriff of the county because they know you have a zero tolerance mindset and you're going to come do some things, they will generate stuff and try to get people to fit as over here. What I'm getting is they'll make up stuff about you, and then when you read about it or somebody gives it to you, how can somebody say that about you? But they will do whatever to skew somebody's mindset of what they think about you to try to get that vote to go the other way. So there's a lot of, and I guess it kind of is backstabbing on people you don't really know well. And this goes for, I've been talking to a lot of people on LinkedIn, and apparently this goes on across the entire country, from city level, county, state, federal, congressmen, everything. They all go through, on what I'm experiencing, many of them go through a lot worse than what I'm personally going through. But I truly believe that God doesn't put anything in front of us that we can't handle. I call it a hurdle, and if you're either going to go over it, go under it, blast right through it, but you're going to get over that hurdle. So,
amen. Well, Banning, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to come back on the podcast. You're a really encouraging guy, and I thank you a lot. I really do.
I appreciate it, brother. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the 10 Code Mindset Podcast. Do not forget to check the show notes below for more information that can benefit you. And I ask that you please give the podcast an honest rating and review, particularly if you're listening to it on Apple Podcast. I look forward to talking to you in the next episode. Take care of yourself. Show up for you. Show up that much better for others. May God bless.